Regularly have incredibly experienced recruitment business leaders who have built something significant or special and whose experience is gold dust for anybody building and scaling as a recruitment business leader. Philip Hanna evolved from being a successful consultant through to ultimately leading a 400-person recruitment business as CEO of the Venn Group. He shares what he's learned about leadership, about scaling, his expertise in public sector recruitment, and he shares some of the mistakes he's made, but also the principles that have underpinned his achievements as a leader and in business. Fascinating insights. Enjoy. A very warm welcome to the TRM podcast to Philip Hanna. Thank you for joining us, Philip.
Good morning. Thank you for inviting me.
So we're going to extract out of your career as a recruitment business leader some of the gems and some of the experiences and some of the things that you've learned over the years. But for those people who aren't aware of you or familiar with you, are you happy to sort of talk us through what got you to where we are today?
Yeah, I'm sure it was a bit of a convoluted journey. So I was brought up in Ireland and went to school in Dublin, university in Dublin, did engineering. Quickly realized doing engineering, I didn't want to be an engineer. My father, he was an entrepreneur. He had a pharmaceutical business, a generic pharmaceutical. And so I joined him for a couple of years within the HR department. Didn't really know what I was doing, but he trained me up or helped train me up. But I also realized, as well as not wanting to be an engineer, I didn't want to live in Ireland for the rest of my life. I wanted to travel the world a bit. So I ended up in the UK initially with the thought of spend 5 years there maximum and then move on to somewhere else, whether that be Australia or America. And 35 years later, I'm still stuck in the UK. So, and I have no problem with that. I've loved it. It's been great and really enjoyed it. How did I end up in recruitment? When I got to the UK, didn't really know what I was looking for, saw an advert for sort of what looked like an HR role with some commission. I like the idea of a commission-based job rather than just a straight salary, probably from my father's entrepreneurial background. So took the job and soon realized that it was not HR. Recruitment is not HR. It very much is not. But that was the bit I loved, actually. I love the whole selling of it. I've always enjoyed selling, and I've always enjoyed that excitement of, getting a deal and getting the commission from that deal. I was at a few companies. Long story short, I eventually ended up at a proper company, Baden Clark. Started there as a consultant on the private sector finance team. I did that for a couple of years, went quite well, got promoted to manager. And part of the promotion was I was asked to set up the public sector division at Baden Clark. This was back in, I'm showing my age a little bit now, but back in 1994, when really there wasn't much temporary market within the public sector. It was just starting and opening up. And I sort of happened to be the right place, right time, made me look very good because the market took off. This is in days before PSLs, before MVs. It was, you really could ring up a client and get a job on, as radical as that sounds.
Presumably you knew nothing about the public sector.
No, absolutely nothing.
Okay,
so yes, that was an education in itself. I'm not sure sometimes they knew much about it either. No, I'm joking. But no, it was because they had never used temporary staff really before in general. It had all been sort of adverts and permanent jobs and had to be advertised. So using agencies for the public sector was quite a new thing at the time as well. So I think everyone was finding their feet, and we just happened by luck really just got in there early. And it did really take off, and as I say, it did make me look quite good. But we grew from one team to I think we had about 6 teams quite quickly. Anyway, so I did that, and then I was asked to, on the back of that, set up the CNI, so the private sector IT division within Baden Clark. So I did that for a couple of years. Then the company got sold, so I was there for about 8 years. The company got sold to an American company. The 2 founders left, and I stayed on for a while, but actually the culture was very different after that, and at the time I was starting to probably not enjoy it as much as I had the previous 8 years, which I'd loved. I got a call from the previous owners saying, look, we're setting up a new company, would you come and join us? And that was Venn Group. So
Can I just, because I know a few people from ex Baden and Clark and who are really great. In what way did that kind of shape you? What was the sort of Baden and Clark philosophy that you took on with you to the Venn Group?
I suppose one of the strongest ethos was team. It was commission based. Team based commission. Everything was team and training were the two things really. And we just happened to. There was a bunch of people. I think I was mentioning before the podcast that I met some of them last night. I'm still very good friends with them. Lots of husbands and wives have come out of these relationships, and it was almost like being at school. It was a crowd of about 30, 40 of us, all got on fantastically well. And I think it was a collective, it was a team. We were, we worked hard, we played hard with each other. And so there was just a common goal between us to get the job done. And that's an ethos we did try to take through to Venn Group as well, actually.
And did that come from the business leaders, or is that a cultural thing, or that doesn't just happen, does it?
No, it was very much from the business leaders. It was very much from Deirdre Moynihan, who was the MD at the time. She was very much into. I think she was the one that was responsible for changing it from individual commission to team commission. That is a big step change, because all of a sudden, if you're thinking of temporary recruitment and you've got 10 jobs on and you're out at a client visit and those jobs come on, if you're not there in individual commission, who's going to fill those roles for you? Who's really going to want to fill those roles? Whereas if you're in a team, it doesn't matter who is where. If somebody's out getting new business on, or somebody's on the phone filling jobs from one organization, these jobs come in, they will get serviced equally as well, because it's that whole team that's got an interest in making sure that those jobs get filled.
Okay.
And lots of companies will say they do work in teams, but it really was genuine team, and because it was team commission, that sort of cemented the whole thing as well.
That was pretty unusual at the time, I would guess.
Yeah, very much so. Yes.
All right.
It's not without its complications as well, because sometimes the big billers, or people that perceive themselves as big billers, sometimes want to move beyond that. So you do have to look at adapting that once people start billing a bit more.
Yeah. No, we've had a member actually who's very successfully transitioned to team bonus last year, I think, and they are happy to accept that big billers who are hungry for big personal earnings are not going to join them.
That's right. Yeah,
they're fine with that. So the Venn Group, what was your brief when you joined them?
So we started on one morning in, I think it was October 2000. We had serviced officers, and we'd recruited, I think, 5 people, so myself plus 4. And those 5 people were in this serviced office one Monday morning. We had nothing. We had a desk, because the serviced office didn't have a computer. There was a desk and a telephone, I think. So the first thing we did was went down to Ryman's and bought some pens and some pads to stick up on the wall. And that week, we literally spent the week putting sticky paper up on the wall, writing all the clients that we knew that we thought we could do business with, because there weren't people we knew, and it was an eclectic bunch of people from different sectors. So we just really had a week or so of strategizing. Who could we call? What would we do? Obviously, the next thing we needed to do was get a way of tracking that all in. Initially, it was all on paper. Long story short, I suppose, 3 months later, we had 30 people. We had a computer system, and we had an accounts package. So we moved pretty quick on that. And then I think it was about 3 months later as well, we moved out of the serviced office into a rented office.
And how was that growth funded in 3 months to get to 30 people?
That we had a lot of funding through the original owners of Badenoch & Clark. So Deirdre Moynihan, Alexander Badenoch. Yeah.
Brilliant. Okay.
Yeah, and we were lucky. You couldn't do it without, to go that sort of expansion that quickly. You've got to have big money behind you.
Yeah, brilliant. All right, and what happened next?
So from there, really, that's how we started. So we hit these 30 people, and we started looking at, okay, what sectors do we want to do? So we're mainly public sector. There were certain restrictions actually on what we couldn't do for a couple of years, but in the end we ended up mainly doing public sector. And public sector is massive, so you've got to pick which bits you want to do. So we just set it up by business units, by teams, doing different parts of different parts of the public sector, very focused. So each team would be specifically focused on that little bit, whether that be, I don't know, revenues and benefits within local government, or legal within the, it was very precise and concise and focused. And it just kept organically growing from there, really. As we sort of had a number in mind where once a team got to a certain number, we think, okay, that's probably enough people and it's making a decent amount of billing. You hit a bit of a limit where you need to then recruit more people and set up another team to double up, really, rather than doubling up within that one team. You set it up again and you double up, and with that creates its own opportunities for people within the company as well.
How did it? I'm sort of imagining you with a big whiteboard. Public sector is not a place that I've done a lot of work in, but I'm just imagining all the different areas and niches and specialism you could focus on. And so how did you pick and choose the ones?
I suppose the ones that we felt that would give us the quickest return initially, and then you get round to doing everything over the long term, or not. If it's not worth doing, then don't bother. One of the biggest mistakes you can make is with the public sector, because it's so huge, is try and cover the whole thing in one go. And so the example I would give is, if you take a consultant, if you say, right, your patch is, I don't know, a county, and they can do all of public sector in that county. So that could be NHS, it could be local government, could be central government, could be charities, could be education, all those things. You can't possibly do that. They have to, you have to assign them a small bit. So what we would do is say, okay, let's take the example. You're only going to get local government, and you're only going to get a much smaller geographical area. And much better to do it thoroughly and call the client, in the days when you could call the client anyway, call the client 3 times a month, rather than having a much wider patch and calling each client, I don't know, once every 3 months or something. You've got to be a bit of a pest, as we all know in recruitment, to start with, because a client isn't going to just suddenly say, oh yes, here's my job, and please fill it for me. You've got to give them a reason. So you have to build up the relationship with the client, and you're not going to do that if you're skimming over lots and lots. You need to keep it quite focused.
So fast forward to 2021.
Yeah, so 2021.
Where did you take the Venn Group? Where was it?
So we went from those initial 5 people to, I think at one point we had about 400 employees, and a multi-million-pound turnover company. I can't remember the exact numbers now, but I think it was 150, 175 million, something like that. So a big organization, and very much a market leader within the public sector. Yes.
Okay, so scaling, something that fascinates me. A lot of our members are really interested in scaling effectively, and I've done a fair bit myself. What lessons did you kind of learn if you looking back on that journey?
Sorry, say it again. Sorry.
Scaling effectively. What have you got to get right?
So I think you've got to not be afraid of making mistakes. You have to accept that there's going to be a fair bit of attrition in those early, because if you recruit 30 people, it is impossible to keep all 30. There is a bit of a numbers game going on. One of the main things is we very early on got a training person. So you need to train people to do the role as quick as possible, and then you need to empower. I mean, I think it's 2 things. One, you've got to train them, but then you've got to let them go. You can't keep holding their hands. And I'm a very firm believer, anyone knows me well, of delegating. But you've got to arm the people properly, get them trained up, and then delegate them and let them go off and do it. I think so. Without that training, without that focus on training, then you've got appraisal. So there's no point in saying, right, go off and do it, without then coming back and having a look at, well, what worked. So we were quite hot on doing appraisals, whether that be monthly, probably team weekly meetings, just making sure that there was good communication, so that the direction that we had chosen to go in, or the markets we'd chosen to go after, that we all knew what we were doing, why we were doing, and how we were going to do it. But there's no point in saying that and then right off you go. You then need to make sure that you're monitoring that. And as I say, on a weekly, monthly basis, we would sit down with either individuals or teams, both at consultant level and management level, and make sure that we were on track of where we wanted to go. So it could sometimes appear a bit meeting heavy, and maybe sometimes it was, but they probably had more benefit than downside.
But again, it's a good old, the basics done brilliantly. Let's train people properly. Let's create a performance framework. Let's make sure communication is as good as it needs to be.
Yeah. And it's sort of, looking back on it, obviously it went from 5 to 400. That sounds amazing, and it was amazing. It was great fun, but it didn't happen overnight. That's the thing. So you get there gradually. Before you know, you look back and you think, oh wow, we're actually quite big now. At the time, you're just focused on building. You're not really thinking necessarily about how big it's getting or how big you want it to be. You're adapting to the market conditions at the time, and if it's busy, you're going to keep adding consultants in.
Yeah. Let's get on to the fun stuff, the things we got wrong. What were the looking back at the things or times where you actually think something we can learn from that?
Yeah, I was thinking about this. I think one of the big things that we learned and probably could have done better is, again, when you're growing a company that quickly, you do need management. I couldn't have 400 people reporting into me, and so you need a structure of management. And I think sometimes we had too many managers, and I mean, no disrespect to the people involved, but it was our fault in letting it happen. But too many managers that would become a manager and stop billing. And so then you end up with an awful lot of quite expensive, high-level people that are very good at management and they're very good at the job, and they were very good billers generally, suddenly not billing. So if I was to do it again, I would make sure that anyone that got promoted keeps clients and keeps billing. I know lots of companies do manage to do that. And of course that's hard because you're expected to manage the staff as well as billing. You don't maybe have to be at the same level. I also think from an enjoyment point of view, I know once as MD, I couldn't really in temporary market have clients because I wasn't available to service them all the time. You can do that a little bit more in permanent recruitment, actually. But I really missed the whole, closing the deal and speaking to the clients and making that difference. So for me, it was seeing other people, training people up and seeing them do it. I think as a manager of 4 or 5 people, you should, and you can, still be able to bill. So I think that was probably one of the main things, that if I was doing it again, I would make sure that we didn't fall into that trap of them not billing.
That's a hell of a transition from just imagining the 5 of you when you started out, sticking your post-its all over or whatever you did, and then you take it up to the 400. Which was the most kind of enjoyable phase for you? Was it the craziness of the first few months, or was it the actually, no, we've really built something?
Yeah, it's a bit like when somebody asks you which was the best age of your child. They're all good at the time, aren't they?
Yeah.
But I suppose the most exciting part was, on that day one, I'm recruiting everyone. Yes, of course, and that, it didn't come without its frustrations. We didn't get immediate success, and one of the things you have to really look at when you're setting up any company and in any sector is that if a sector is not going as planned, don't flog it. Don't keep flogging the dead horse. Move on to something else. Try and see where the market's going. Don't be afraid to say, okay, right, you 4 people, or you 4 teams, or you whole business unit. Let's take you out of that sector and let's go for this sector because we think that this one isn't as good as we thought. And so you have to be a bit brave sometimes. And obviously, they're not going to be a market leader straight away in those sectors. You've got to build it up. But don't ever be afraid to change your strategy if what you're doing at the time, or if a market was very buoyant and very successful, and this can happen in all markets, but in particular public sector with changes of government and changes of strategy within the government, that a certain sector that was doing very well, or something that came out of a government initiative, that might disappear over time. So you just need to be aware of that it's starting to dry up a little bit, and right, what's the next thing, or where's the next initiative coming from within the government, and make sure you're flexible and adaptable, I would say.
It's really interesting. Every time I speak to somebody like you who's had let's call it significant career in recruitment, the reflection of move away from stuff or people that's not working quickly, and every one of us has held on to people or strategies a little bit longer than we should do, and it's very consistent. But the other thing you were saying, it was we were doing some work with members looking at the fastest growing 100 recruitment businesses in the UK and what was enabling them to grow so quick. And 2 of the things that you've just touched on is their speed of adapting to different market conditions, and also making sure they're focused on the candidate scarce, high growth markets, and being in the right place.
I think the other thing, you can't hide from the fact we had investors with deep pockets, so clearly that helps. And of course, you can go to a bank and you can get your invoice discounting and all that stuff, but it does help if you've got investors that are and they put in a sizable amount of money to get the thing up and running. So if you can, particularly in temporary recruitment, not quite so critical in permanent recruitment, but if you've got suddenly got 100 temps out that you didn't have the day before, you need some way of funding that to be able to pay them, and so that can be tricky for new startups.
Were there any acquisitions on that journey?
No. No,
Surely.
we started in London, and then we expanded throughout the UK. So we pretty much covered the whole of England.
Yeah.
We also had an office in Ireland for a while.
Was that a specific strategy? Let's grow it ourselves, as opposed to look for.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and actually, talking about, I was going to mention this at the end of the podcast, but I may as well bring it up now because it's sort of relevant to what we're talking about. But I would say we and lots of other the companies, all the companies I've worked for, were often quite inward looking and very skeptical of other agencies and not wanting to share information and thinking that our way was the best way, and it was for us, obviously, but it wasn't the only way, is the point. And having left, I've been on a gardening leave for the last 12 months, and I've been to a few meetings with you and your TRN guys, and suddenly realized that actually there's a whole world of people doing quite similar but little subtly different. But there's no trade secrets to the whole thing, and I think the more you can share information, and so again, if I was to do it again, I would definitely. Yeah, we were a member of AppSco, but we didn't probably use them as much as we did. If I'm perfectly honest, I'd never even really heard or taken any notice of TRN. And now, obviously, I haven't spoken to you several times, been to some of your lunches and speaking to some of your clients, that there is a whole myriad of information out there that people should be utilizing. So actually, well done you for getting that set up. So.
No, thank you. Just from a leadership point of view, and I guess having been on gardening leave for a little while now, you've had a chance to reflect on things. Your kind of leadership lessons that you might share over the years, because like the rest of us, you'll have evolved.
Yeah, so again, I mean, I'm talking about training earlier on, training consultants. Training shouldn't stop once you become a good consultant. So it's really important. If you want to have a good manager and you want to be able to not be doing all the management yourself, then you've got to train those people how to do that. So yes, training should never stop. You get to the early stages of how to pick up a phone and make a phone call and that sort of stuff, to how to manage a bigger book, to then how to train people and manage people. And management, a lot of it is about being somebody's life coach. It's not just about cracking the whip and say, right, do this, do that. Actually, you've got to be their friend, you've got to be their parent, you've got to be all those things. You've got to be a good listener. But ultimately, you also need to be somebody that's giving direction and leading by example. I talk about that billing thing, but leading by example. And I'm always a very firm believer, don't ask somebody to do what you're not comfortable doing yourself. I mean, I think that's so important.
Yeah.
And just treat people decently. I mean, treat them as human beings, not somebody that you're. Sometimes, you recruit consultants and think, right, this is my team and this is how I'm going to make my money. Actually, they're all individuals wanting to have a career. Just remember that it is a career that they're trying to forge, and you're trying to help them. And that's the satisfaction, is absolutely seeing them go from being I mean, we've got some people actually still at Venn Group that were there in those very early weeks. And so, that's a hell of a career over the 23 years, and they're now directors in that company, and it's lovely to see.
Yeah.
I probably didn't directly answer your question though, which was how. What do you mean by how do we empower them, or how do we?
No, I again interested in some of the as we're setting out on our journey and we're getting our management leadership responsibilities, and the leader you were in your late 20s, your 30s, to the leader you are today.
Yeah. I've always been quite a good listener. I think that's really important. I know I'm doing a lot of the talking here today, but that's the nature of the podcast. But generally, I prefer to listen to what people have got to say, because unless you know what people want and what their concerns are, or, in a sales point of view, again, there's lots of things about selling, but ultimately you have to listen to what it is the client wants before you can start selling. And it's exactly the same with training and leading people, and I think it's very important that you have a clear strategy of what you and the company want, but making sure that is very well communicated all the way through the company, because there's no point in the management having one direction that they want to go in and not telling the rest of the company how they want to go in. So I think that whole communication, sharing of ideas is very good, but then I come back to what I was saying earlier on. Some of those ideas, they need to probably be a bit more external rather than just internal to get a better flavor of it.
Okay, I'm interested in your view of the market and how best to navigate through that. But there's one, you've just been responsible for the overhaul of the tech strategy, and I'm just interested because it's particularly for our members, it's one of the things that they find phenomenally taxing. There's so many different options and strategies. There's so many new widgets coming along left, right, and centre, and they see successes and they see people raving about different things. But I'm just interested the overhaul briefly, what did it involve and what are the kind of lessons you learned from saying, right, let's get this right?
Sure. First thing I say is don't take it lightly. It's a massive project. So to that end, actually, what we decided to do is I sort of stepped aside from being MD to become COO for the last 2 years, and it was 2 years. So, it's not a quick process. So I think the more time you spend at the beginning working out what it is, what you want, why you need it, is so important because, and to that end, we actually got a consultant in. I think it's absolutely vital, and I'm glad we did it. I wasn't sure at the time because it was quite expensive, but we recruited somebody that had done it before on a project management basis. Because if I'd been trying to do that all myself, it would have taken much longer. So that person was able to tell us where the problems had arisen before. You never want to be referring back to the contract either. So make sure that you've got all the contracts sorted out as much as you possibly can. You can't cover everything. And then the other thing, I suppose, what we did, and I wouldn't do this next time, is we tried to go big bang. So we were changing the CRM, we were changing the accounts package, we were changing the payroll system, we were bolting some new stuff on. And that was me, actually. I'm a bit like that. I'm thinking, okay, if we're going to get a new toy, let's get it perfect. And the guy, the project manager, has said, "Are you sure you want to do it this way? Shouldn't we just maybe put this bit in first?" And then, but in hindsight, he was absolutely right. So we did get there, but it was tough. It was really tough, and I would say to anyone thinking about doing it, do try if you can afford it, and you can find somebody that has done it. Take them on board and have them hold your hand, even if it doesn't necessarily need to be a project manager, but it needs somebody that you can call on once or twice a week, just to say, well, what about this? What about that? Because these projects are huge, and we went from a massive database to a quite old legacy system to a new cloud-based system. And then we were bolting on lots of because what we wanted, also our information. I think putting the CRM in, putting a new CRM in is really only part of it. So that holds the data. There's no point in having all this data and collecting all this data and adding new content CVs and clients in there all the time, unless you're going to do something with that data. And we've all had these databases that just go bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, and we feel great because we've got such a big database. And then you look back, how many of the people have you actually placed in that database? If you've done 1%, you've done well. So why bother having such a big thing in the first place? So yeah, we added a few things on in terms of a parsing system and a system of monitoring consultants' appraisals, actually, but more on an electronic basis. And so they were able to self-serve. And there's some clever stuff out there, and obviously it's changing all the time now with AI and whatever. But the other thing is, so expect it to take.
Expect it to take longer, but make sure you got the right expertise.
Yeah, expect to take longer and take twice as long as you thought, and probably cost twice as much as you thought, and maybe not cost twice. But I don't mean in terms of the systems. The other thing I would say, actually, right at the beginning, negotiate that they'll all help the IT companies for this, but negotiate really hard with the companies at the beginning, because you can get some really good deals if you don't just. They will think that they've got the upper hand, and they haven't at all, because there's lots of systems you can choose out there, and they're all open to negotiation in various routes, whether it's price or number of seats or all that sort of stuff. So again, having somebody that's had the experience of that negotiation can be pretty useful.
Yeah, fantastic. I think the biggest thing I see is maybe too much responding to seeing things, hearing things, as opposed to going big picture and saying, what are we trying to get to now?
Actually, the other thing I would say is don't be too perfectionist about it, that you've got the perfect system on go live date, because there is never any perfect system. You know, it might be perfect on the day you put it in, if you're lucky, but it's going to evolve. That system, a particular cloud-based system, is not going to be the same system that you put in today. In 12 months' time will be a different system, because they're developing their system all the time as well. So get something that you're comfortable with, that does the job, because again, what we probably tried to do is have it all completely automated and complete overhaul. And actually, we should have just put something in that was way better than what we already had, and then develop it once it's live. But it has to obviously be able to do the job. But don't underestimate it. Particularly if you're a temp business and you're changing your CRM and your accounts package at the same time with your payroll system, it's a big old job.
Yeah. Okay, let's move on to the market, Philip.
Yeah.
Been a tough year for a lot of people, and you know, some seasoned recruiters have said, saying it's the toughest year in recruitment I've had. What's your sort of take, and how did you navigate, and what would you share about navigating through?
Yeah, I mean, I was at a function last night, and there were I spoke to 3 different people from 3 different sectors, 3 different companies. All 3 of them were saying really tough year. And I've been sitting at home painting my windows, actually, not painting that picture as you thought the other day, but so I'm slightly out of the day-to-day, what's happening today in terms of the market. And I suppose that, in a way, sort of answers the question that markets come and go, don't they? So don't panic. And we go back to what I was talking about earlier on, that if something has slowed down, if you can see there's an opportunity to move across to something else, then that's what you've got to do. And particularly as I go back to public sector, which isn't all we did, by the way, by a long way. I don't want Venn to be associated with just public sector. They did lots of other stuff as well, but public sector, they were definitely a market leader in that. But there is so much, you know, let's say, I don't know, if you look at it, you've got central government, you've got local government, you've got NHS, you've got charities, you've got third sector, you've got education. They're not all going to go slow at the same time. So it is just a case of thinking, okay, is this just a slowdown in the market? I mean, what I don't like to do is lose consultants just because the market has gone quiet. You need to find a way of keeping them motivated, keeping them earning money. So that usually involves looking at a different market. Now, it could be coming out of public sector completely, actually. And that is actually another advantage of a team-based environment, is that we always try to have consultants and management actually as adaptable as possible. So if I wanted to move a consultant from doing, I don't know, let's say estates and facilities in NHS to technology in central government, we were able to do that pretty quickly, because it's the same core skills really that people are using. Whereas sometimes, and because they were team-based, they didn't necessarily own, inverted commas, the clients. So there isn't the same, I need to hold on to this because this is my livelihood. Actually, we can move them over there. And actually that invigorates the people, because consultants don't want to be stuck in a market that's not going very well, do they? But also, you know, it's just been a weird old year, hasn't it? Well, it's been a weird few years really, but I think you just have to be brave. Stick to your principles. If you think it's right and you think it's going to come back, you've just got to stick in there, and maybe cut some costs elsewhere if you need to, if you have to. But don't jump out of a market too quickly, because it's a lot harder to get back into once you've left it.
No, it's tricky. Right, final question. Just I'm always in to see what's inspiring different people. What's inspiring you at the moment?
What's inspiring me? Well, so I have, as you know, I've worked in Baden Clark for 8 years and Venn Group for 23 years. So what's that? 31 years in total. Pretty much, it's 2 companies, but very same structure, same ethos. And I find myself, there was an MBO at Venn Group, and I've decided to not be part of that MBO. Mainly because I just fancied a change. I thought, okay, with that experience, you know, I could carry on doing that for maybe another 5-10 years, but actually you get to a point after 23 years in a company, which is probably too long. So I'm really, what's motivating me now, this sort of thing, having these sort of chats. I've never done this before. And I really enjoy this. I'm really enjoying, you know, through your network and some others, speaking to companies that are in a stage where we were at maybe 15-20 years ago, wanting to know how to get to the next stage. And it's not the same for every single company, but I think I've got enough experience to be able to go into those companies, and there's no magic bullet here, but you go in and just have a look at what they're doing and just little tweaks here and there every now and again. And I'm really enjoying that. I think it's fascinating to see what everyone else has done. And I wish I'd done it years ago, actually. Not left Venn Group, but I think we could have probably spoken to more companies, and maybe, I mean, you could even do some NED stuff, non-exec stuff, while you're still working at your own company, couldn't you? And I think probably more people should do that, because you're sharing your information, and at the end of the day, it's not probably information unless you're giving actual, percentages and specific market detail away. There is loads of scope for helping each other, and that can be mutually beneficial. So I'm really excited about that, and hopefully taking some of these new startups, whether it's been a brand new startup, maybe some, I've got a couple of people that I know would be interested in investing in a new person wanting to start up with me, sort of holding their hands and leading their way through it, or a company that's maybe been around 2, 3, 5, 7 years, whatever the number is, that wants to go to the next level. And I think that is what's making me get excited about the market now.
Yeah, no, very exciting. And I was going to ask you, but you kind of answered it. Now you come to the end of your gardening leave. I've seen it time and time again where somebody with your wealth of experience goes out there, whether it's chair, NED, consultant, whatever, you'll be snapped up really quick. What are your dream kind of clients that you'd love to be working with?
Dream clients are, well, I suppose it's kind of, it's what I've just been saying there really, is that where there's and it doesn't, I don't want to be just public sector, because there's way more to it than that. It doesn't have to be recruitment, although that is what I know, I suppose. But I'm just really interested in those companies that are, I'm seeing one in a couple of weeks' time, where they've got funding, but they don't know really what to do with that funding and how to, they don't want to waste it. So that's as exciting really as doing it for my own company, is going in and sharing the ideas and hopefully showing them how to do it, because the reward at director level isn't doing the recruitment yourself. It's teaching other people how to do it, whether it's your own company or somebody else's company. So there's a couple of organizations that I'm looking at working with, and I'm really quite excited about seeing where I can take them and watching that progress develop.
Love it. Philip, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure.
Very excited to see some of the people you're going to end up working with, and we'll certainly be talking some more and keeping you involved into your end. But thank you, very, very exciting, and exciting next chapter. So
yes, indeed, and thank you very much for inviting me on this, and actually thank you for me. You've been passing me some leads of organizations that might want my help, and very much appreciated, and thank you very much for that.
Pleasure. Brilliant. We'll speak soon.
Don't forget to follow the TRM podcast on Spotify or Apple Podcasts for a new exciting episode every week.